This is Paranormal Geek Official, where the truth can be stranger than fiction.
Welcome back. Welcome to Paranormal Geek, where the truth can be sometimes strange. Here joining me today is Randy J. Randy J is a historian and a Lebanon, PA native. He has recently researched and nominated 4 properties that have been successfully added into the National Register of Historic Places. He is the author of 3 recent history books and writes articles for historical journals, local newspapers, magazines, and online publications, and has also appeared on several radio shows and PBS documentaries. He earned both a master's degree and a bachelor's degree from California State University. He is currently on the board of directors of the Almond Beach Historical Society. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I brought you on because I'm as the name of the show, I'm a geek for paranormal, but that includes history. And locally where I live at, I was at Lebanon, Pennsylvania, there's a very interesting building that you talked about. You made an article, and it's the Light Fort's Lebanon's oldest, most mysterious building.
Yeah, Lights Fort was built in 1742, and that was before the United States was even founded. Pennsylvania at that time was a colony of Britain. So Lights Fort has been standing for way more than 200 years, and it also played a minor role in the French and Indian War. It was actually what they called a public fortress at the time, and it allowed the townspeople to flee to the fort, the protection of the fort, because back in those days, in the 18th century, most houses in the area, the vast majority of them, were made out of logs and wood, so that the Indians could easily burn them down. So when there was any type of a skirmish coming, Indian sightings and so forth, a lot of the townspeople would flee into Lights Fort for protection. So that's kind of how it got its name, Lights Fort, because most of its existence, it's been a house. At one time it was a distillery. At one time it was a grain maintenance and housing facility, and it was even apartments at one time. So now it's kind of standing vacant, and there's different organizations around the Lebanon County area that are trying to raise the funds to have it restored and turned into a museum.
I hope they do turn it into a museum, because it's very interesting to find a lot of old buildings like that look so falling to the eye. And plus the history with the Indian and the fighting that used to go on here.
Well, even before the French and Indian War, white settlers were encroaching onto Indian lands, what they called the area west, actually, because most of the people that were living in Pennsylvania at the time were living near Philadelphia in the eastern part of the state. So as they started to branch out, move west, Lebanon was kind of a crossroads between that traffic. So there was several reported Indian attacks and skirmishes. And then during the French and Indian War, most of the skirmishes happened up at Fort Swatara, which was in the northern part of the county. And the good thing about that was that prevented the Indians from coming down into the more populated areas, which would have been Lebanon and Myerstown at that time, and Lancaster, of course. And by the way, in that time period, there was not a Lebanon County. That was all part of Lancaster County.
Right. That's what I saw. I was like, okay. I didn't know that Lebanon was never always Lebanon. It was just Lancaster, and they added that, or they changed it later. What drew your interest to Fort Lebanon, the oldest and most mysterious building in the area?
Well, I grew up in the area, so as a kid, I walked by there hundreds and hundreds of times, and I was always fascinated with the mystique of the building. When you look at it today, it's not the original configuration. The front part of the building suffered some storm damage back in the 1940s, and then there was a beverage distributor in there at one time as well, and they had ripped out some of the walls so they could put a big sign there. So part of the restoration process is to rebuild all the walls back to their original configuration. And they do have all of the limestone blocks to do that. They just don't have the money at this point to go ahead and finish that restoration, which is probably going to cost upwards of $1 million to get everything done and all the walls rebuilt and the electric put back in and things like that. It's going to be a fairly expensive renovation process to get that building back into its original look and feel that it had back in the 1700s.
Can you share any intriguing legends or stories associated with the Fort Lebanon that have captured people's imaginations over the years?
Well, the main piece of folklore about Lights Fort is what they call the subterranean tunnels. And folklore has it that these subterranean tunnels ran for almost a mile. So they started out at Lights Fort, and then they went up to 10th and Willow Street, which now is the Stevens Towers. At one time, that was called the Stevens School there, and then right next to it was the Lebanon High School, believe it or not. And as late as the 1950s, somebody I knew that just recently passed away, he went to school there at Stevens School, and they always told the students, don't go into the basement, there's dangerous tunnels down there. So there was some type of a physical tunnels down there. They might have been storm tunnels or something, pipe, plumbing pipes or whatever, but we don't know. But the folklore says that they stopped there, and then they continued up to where 8th and Cumberland Street is today. Behind there, at one time, that was the Lebanon County Courthouse. But prior to the courthouse being built, there was an entrance and exit part to get into the tunnel there, and then over at 10th and Willow Street as well. And then the folklore has it that, that was a big residential area back in the 1700s. So people would flee into these tunnels at these different entrance points, and then they would walk through these subterranean tunnels all the way to Lights Fort, and they would hide out there until either the Indians left or they would be able to chase them away with some type of armed conflict. But that's the main folklore. Now, the problem is nobody ever was able to prove it. There's never been any type of archaeological digs out there to prove that there was a tunnel. And, we might as well, it's a big, giant piece of Lebanon County folklore. So I would just as soon have it remain a piece of folklore than have somebody come in with LiDAR technology, get ground penetrating radar and try to find the remnants of a tunnel, because if they never find them, then that's going to eliminate that piece of folklore and the mystique of Lights Fort and the mystique of Lebanon and whatnot,
And it could be real, because I understand. In fact, I used to live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There's tunnels and stuff too, and other places I've heard. It makes sense that it would be possible.
Oh yeah, thousands of years ago, over in the Middle East, they're still finding underground cities over there. Really, really elaborate underground cities and so forth. And then, that area of Pennsylvania, there was a lot of coal mining going on. You would have had the skill set to build a subterranean tunnel. There's no doubt about that. So whether they were there or not, again, is a mystery and a big part of folklore.
What do you think I use these tunnels?
Well, if they would have had tunnels, they probably would have used them for cold storage. That's what they used the basement for. In fact, there's still a live spring in the basement of Lights Fort. It still runs water today. Now, they did cap it. It was considered to be potable water, drinkable water, but they're not using it for that. But back in the 1700s, they had a water source down there, and then that would make it cool as well. So if there were anybody hiding out in the tunnels and hiding out in the basement, they'd automatically have a water source. A lot of those old Pennsylvania Germanic structures, like Lights Fort, were built over springs, so they would have water internal to the building. So that was a part of that type of architecture back in those days.
That's very interesting. I've researched the paranormal quite a bit, and usually anything with moving water, but you said it's capped at the moment. It's not moving.
Yeah, they put like a clear glass plate over where the water is. You can still see the water flowing there, but the idea of it is they don't want anybody drinking from it. So they kind of put that safety net in there. Well, 250 years ago, that would have been your daily water and bathing water and everything else coming right out of it.
That would make sense with the following story that I saw. Anything with moving water, they say in my research I found, usually brings or attracts the paranormal. like a magnet.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can believe that because it's water is a life giver, right? So whether you're in this dimension or another dimension, I guess you're related to water somehow.
And then the stones, what kind of stones do you know?
Well, that was all limestone.
Limestone.
Yeah, limestone. Yeah, a predominant building material of the time in the Lebanon County area, and it really still is today if you think about it. But it's probably cheaper just to buy fabricated bricks and stones than it is to go out and mine limestone today.
Well, that's another thing on my list, like for paranormal stuff, if that's associated with the location, then that's another thing that can possibly bring or capture or be attracted. Like it records, limestone usually records anything energetically wise that's supposedly in the research I found. They might have something there paranormal. The other question, has there been any surprising discoveries or unexpected twists emerged about Fort Lebanon's past?
There's not really been a lot of research recently done on it. Some of the research I've done over the last several years, I've gotten a couple articles published. One of the local news stations from Harrisburg came over and covered it. There was some significant research done back in the 60s and 70s by a couple of guys. One of the guys, Bruce Baumgartner, he works over at the Lebanon County Historical Society, and he's a historian, and he did some research specifically about the French and Indian War and how that related to Lights Fort. Like I said, a couple publications I did, and also worked with the Lebanon Daily News on a publication a couple of years ago. So those are the only recent search that I know, basically done by myself, really.
There's 2 or 3 more questions. I'm not like speaking too much time. How do you think uncovering the secrets of the Fort Lebanon contributes to our understanding of the local history and heritage?
Well, obviously, Lights Fort, being the oldest building in Lebanon County, is a big giant part of the historical significance of the area. And all these different mysterious stories about it, ghost stories and the tunnels, and the fact that it's been there and been used for so many different purposes over the years, really is probably, I would say, the number one landmark in Lebanon County today would be Lights Fort because of how mysterious it really is.
The final one, and the one that really drew me even more to this, I love history, but paranormal really captures my heart. The story with the little girl.
Yeah, Marcella Light. This is back around 1750s. I think it was 1757, where she was in the kitchen or something in the downstairs area, and she heard an Indian girl crying outside. Went out to investigate, and this girl was hungry, and it was cold. It was November night. It was very cold, so she actually brought her into Lights Fort, gave her some food to eat, and then took her upstairs to sleep. And a tinder box fell out of her dress or her whatever she was wearing at the time, and that was the way people used to carry them to be able to start fires, kind of like the way we do today with matches and lighters. So this caught Marcella's attention, and she laid there pretending she was asleep, and this Indian girl slept outside, and she was trying to burn down the barn that was next to the Lights Fort at the time. So Marcella knocked her unconscious and then called for her dad. And her dad came down, and he handed her a hunting knife, and he said, "Do her in." She was trying to kill us and burn our house down. So Marcella, the story has it, she killed her. And then later, either that day or the next day, they found an Indian encampment near Lights Fort. So they figured there was people hiding around there, and they were going to attack Lights Fort, kill everybody or whatever, after they started this fire as a diversion. So, years and years later, there's been a couple of stories about people seeing a female Indian ghost haunting the Lights Fort. And then the funny thing is about that is when you go back and look at the history, there really was a tragic Indian girl murder in Lights Fort, like I say, back in 1757. So that's kind of the more interesting ghost story about Lights Fort. But I know of a couple other ones as well. Back in the 50s and 60s, when people used to live in there, there was a man, a ghost figure of a man dressed in colonial clothing that was walking around haunting the second floor of Lights Fort, which back in them days was two big bedrooms up there, and then there was a hallway, and then another little ladder going up to the third story, the attic section at the time. And then fairly recently, a few years ago, there was a guy there doing some work, and it was a real hot summer day, and he was up on a ladder, and all of a sudden he got these really cold feelings, sensations, and bitter cold feelings and all that, which is one of the classic signs, or I don't know if you want to call it a sign, but one of the classic feelings that there's some type of paranormal activity in the area.
Wow, that's
So there is, yeah, there's been, several ghost stories in there over the years. And, now the building's been vacant for, 20, 30, 40 years. There really hasn't anybody been living in there. So obviously there's, outside of this maintenance guy, there's really nobody in there for long periods of time. So to my knowledge, there haven't been any recent sightings of this Indian girl or this guy walking around in colonial outfit.
well, we're heading to the end of the show, so I wanted to take advantage and give you a chance to promote anything that you told me earlier you had something going on for.
Yeah, I'll be in Pennsylvania in August, so I'm going to be doing a program on August 24th. That's a Thursday afternoon, and that starts at noontime and goes to 1 o'clock or so. And I'm going to be doing it. This program is titled "Remembering the Lebanon County Courthouse and the Colonial Theater," and they're two of the more terrible incidences that we had losing historic buildings in Lebanon County. And when you think, most people that have been around the area for a long time, that really hits a nerve when you start talking about the loss of the Lebanon County Courthouse. And then 23 years ago, when the Colonial Theater got torn down, that was another terrible loss, because people like me that grew up in Lebanon County area, we have a lot of fond memories, especially our childhood memories of going into Colonial Theater. And now there's just a vacant parking lot there that once was this big, magnificent theater. So we are trying to remember our history and do programs like this. And, the people that are working to try to renovate and restore Lights Fort. So there is some efforts out there. It's just a matter of getting money and shows like this and publicity. Hopefully we'll be able to gather up enough people to get the funds together to make sure that these great places like Lights Fort don't ever get torn down.
And speaking of which, if people do want to donate or help out, is there anything that they could do to reach out and help?
Yeah, there's a website, Lebanon County Restoration or something like that. If you just do a search on Google, restoration of Lebanon County landmarks or something like that, you'll find it fairly quick. And there is a concerted group out there that's trying to save some of these buildings, and Lights Fort's at the top of the list.
No, I will look for it too, and then I'll post it on the bottom of the YouTube page in description so people get an opportunity to try to.
Great.
I have a lot of family too that love history here, so they'd probably pitch in too.
Yeah, when you lose these buildings, you're losing a part of your local identity. You're losing a part of your local culture, and it really it takes away from the feeling of belonging when you lose these landmarks. And it's really a terrible thing, but it happens every week all over the country. Lebanon's no different, and Lebanon has really lost its share of landmarks. But believe it or not, there's over 150 significant historic landmarks in Lebanon County, especially in Lebanon City, that are still standing. Let's just hope they continue to stand.
Right. Well, thank you, Randy, for coming on. I hope to have you again sometime in the future. I'm pretty sure you probably know a lot about Lebanon, so. And
yeah, I do, and I'll send you the email with the information on it.
All right, thank you.
Well, goodbye, everybody. I hope you learned something, and I hope you can help and do something. Contribute some time, money, or effort to help us save some of these historic buildings, especially Lights Fort.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you back in the future. And remember, truth can be something stranger than fiction. Bye.
I grew up with the paranormal in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, back in the 90s, from which I never got closure after moving out of my house in my teens. Journey with me as I look for answers and discover secrets to the universe. This is Paranormal Geek Official, where the truth can be stranger than fiction.